Okay, we're back again. We're in the home stretch. The last section that we just finished, the 28 chapters, the essential passage in each of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra, was very important and was expressing the Daishonin's enlightenment. And before I started reading this, I recapped what I consider personally to be a very important concept to understand, that if you read the entire library of Buddhism from Soka Gakkai, you'll only find it in one spot, and that's in the 11th chapter, the 12th, the Treasure Tower chapter. Is important point 13, and I read that before we started. Okay, now we're going to go into the home stretch, the last 28 all the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, beginning on page 221. And this is speaking of the sutra as a whole. And it's going to be referring over and over again, without mentioning it necessarily, the concept of Risoku, and obviously the full attainment in one's present form is the sixth stage of practice, or Kukyo-soku. So I'm going to again preface using a little bit of help from my Zinshi Shiki here that I'm reading from, and proceed my reading on starting on page 221 with a further explanation, because you're going to have to understand. He's going to say all people are Buddha, all living beings are Buddhas. You got to understand what that means. Okay, that doesn't mean that anybody that's walking around breathing is a Buddha, because it's not a manifest state. And in the absence of it being a manifest state, it's only a Buddha in theory. It's no better than anything from the former or the middle day of the law. This is the latter day of the law. With Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, we're actually able to achieve the sixth stage of practice of Kukyo-soku. So please just let me read a little bit before we start reading this, and I'm going to try and get us through as much as I can of the first 14 chapters in the videos that we'll make now, and then I'll finish off the balance of it at a later time. When you see those videos, you'll understand. Keep these principles in mind for the entire 28 chapter reading, though. Okay, just like I hope you did keep them in mind when in the last 28 chapter recap that we did of the essential passage of each of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra, from page 207 up to page 220. So again, Risoku is the concept that a Buddha in theory, somebody that hasn't even heard the name and the words of the truth, is no different as an entity with somebody that has attained the sixth stage of practice. Okay, because all entities are manifestations of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, so please understand that the five subsequent stages of practice that are described by the Daishonin in the orally transmitted teachings in chapter 16, the lifespan chapters, when he talks about the six stages of practice. They're fundamental elements to the truth of what we do as practitioners of the law in the latter day, and what we do in order to attain Buddhahood in our present form. All right, so I'm just clarifying. Risoku says you are a Buddha in principle. Final clarifying statement. Risoku says you are a Buddha in principle. Okay, everybody is a Buddha in principle because they're all living beings. Kukyo-soku declares live as one. Okay, and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the only means by which that declaration becomes real in the latter day of the law. Live as one. Be a Buddha in your present form. That means that nothing is mystical, nothing is abstract, nothing is postponed. Buddhahood revealed in the body, voice, and actions of an ordinary person here and now, exactly as they are the essence of being a Buddha in your present form. If you want, we can, I can explain this further. It says, tie this directly into actual Ichinen Sanzen. Oops, I'm reading it from the bottom up, pardon me. I need to start over. Risoku and Kukyo-soku. Important point 13 from the Treasure Tower chapter. Nichiren's statement of Risoku and Kukyosoku is not an abstract philosophy. These terms belong to the 6 stages of practice, but Nichiren radically regrounds them in the latter day of the law, stripping them of scholastic complacency and restoring them as essential realities. So now, excuse me that I had already read through this and I hadn't refreshed it. Okay, so Risoku, number 1, Buddhahood in principle. What Risoku actually means that all beings are Buddhas in principle because they are expressions of the law of Myoho itself. But here is the critical point Nichiren emphasizes. Risoku is not realization. Risoku is not awareness. Risoku is not lived transformation. That occurs as you try to achieve the 6th stage of practice of becoming a Buddha in your present form. Risoku simply states that the potential exists because life itself is Myoho. The danger of Risoku. If you hear that, that the Risoku and Kukyosoku are inherently identical, okay, you can mistakenly believe that you're already a Buddha just because you're a living being. No, the Buddha potential lies within you, but you have to manifest it. So this is qualifying. Nichiren repeatedly warns implicitly and explicitly that remaining at Risoku is spiritually dangerous in the latter day. So if you think, okay, I've already got the Buddha nature, so when I get around to it, I can go ahead and finish this off. That's a very dangerous attitude to have. Why? Because people mistake conceptual agreement for awakening. And awakening, again, is the Dharma realm emerging in your life and becoming one with the entire realm of phenomena. They say, I understand that I am a Buddha. These are mistaken views. I understand that I am a Buddha. The understanding that you're a Buddha is not Kukyosoku. All beings have the Buddha nature. They understand that theoretically as well, but they still have prejudices and still see separation. That's still, again, not the Dharma realm manifesting your Dharma body, manifesting in your present form. Everything is originally enlightened. Yes, it all is, but it goes back into it's not a manifest state until it emerges from your life through your actions and behavior of mind, mouth, and body. Okay, so no transformation of Risoku doesn't give you, it's no transformation of fear, resentment, arrogance, suffering, action, or compassion. Those are all still not manifest if you're only in the state of Risoku without being a Buddha in theory. Nichiren would call this faithless understanding, an illusion of attainment. Risoku without practice becomes intellectual Buddhism, aesthetic Buddhism. You look like you are, but you aren't really. Identity Buddhism, because I'm part of the Soka Gakkai, or because I read the Gosho, my Buddha nature is present and exists as a Buddha. No, your Buddhahood only comes about by virtue of attaining, of revealing the 6th stage of practice. Or dead Buddhism, in other words, an old understanding that is no longer valid in the current age, the latter day of the law. It is truth without function in that regard. Kukyosoku, ultimate Buddhahood, what Kukyosoku actually is. Kukyosoku is not a future state. It's not a future state. It's not guaranteed unless you manifest it. It is not post-mortem enlightenment. It's not the enlightenment that comes after you die. Any enlightenment that occurs in your life is the only thing that matters. Nothing that occurs after death is real, because you go straight into non-substantiality, and your temporary gathering of the 5 components makeup as a living being no longer exists for you to be able to attain the 6th stage of practice, because it requires practice. It is not a theoretical completion. Kukyosoku is the full manifestation of Buddhahood in one's present form, here and now, through the faith and practice of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nichiren collapses the distance between principle and actuality. That's why he explains both Risoku and Kukyo-soku. This is why he teaches Buddhahood is not discovered. Buddhahood is revealed. Buddhahood is enacted. Buddhahood is lived. Kukyo-soku is when faith has matured into conviction. Chanting has reshaped perception. Understanding has become embodied wisdom. Compassion emerges spontaneously, not through the decision, I'll be compassionate. And life itself becomes proof because your teacher is the Dharma realm, everything around you. You are a Buddha in your present form. That's how Buddhas live. The bridge between Risoku and Kukyo-soku, why practice exists at all. The 6 stages are not a ladder to climb. This is a very easy concept to misunderstand and think stage 1 is a first rung and stage 2 is the second rung, on up to the 6th stage as a ladder that you're climbing. No, the 6 stages are not a ladder to climb. They are a description of awakening unfolding, and there's no timeline for that. You determine the timeline based on the manifest sincerity and endeavor that you make of upholding the vow to become a Buddha in your present form. This isn't about benefits. This is about already perceiving the fact that the greatest benefit is Buddhahood, all right, and seeking that benefit first before you seek, escape from suffering or the accomplishment of personal goals. Risoku explains why awakening is possible, because you already inherently have the Buddha nature so that it can be developed. Kukyo-soku explains why practice is necessary, because you don't get there without the fundamental growth that occurs through going through those stages of practice. That's why it's called the 6 stages of practice. Practice is necessary. The bridge is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, not just this understanding of the difference between the two. Not as a mantra so Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is not a mantra to admire, a concept to explain, a symbol to analyze, but as the action of the Buddha, the voice of awakening, and the engine of transformation, because this going from Risoku to Kukyo-soku is actually this human revolution. It is a transformation of your life and who you are at the very core, because you're now revealing all 3 bodies of which you have been eternally endowed. The Dharma body, the reward body has led to the perception of the Dharma body, and the Dharma body has become manifest, not in just your thinking, but in your behavior and who you are. Okay, you are a Buddha, unmistakably, by every criterion that's established by the Daishonin for being such. Without chanting, Risoku stays dormant. Kukyo-soku never appears. With chanting, the principle turns into function, belief turns into proof, and doctrine turns into life. Why Nichiren places this in the Treasure Tower chapter. The Treasure Tower chapter represents the dignity of one's own life, the emergence of Buddhahood from within in the Sahe world, the collapse of separation between ordinary person and Buddha. That gap has been closed. Risoku is the existence of the tower in principle. Kukyo-soku is the tower arising from the earth. This is why the chapter matters. The Buddha does not descend from anywhere, from elsewhere. Enlightenment does not arrive from outside. The tower appears where you stand. It's in this moment of life, in a single moment of life. Your single moment of life whenever you come to that understanding. 5, the essential clarification for the unawakened, for those people that have not achieved the 6th stage of practice. Please keep this in mind. Most people stop at Risoku and call it faith. Nichiren calls that self-deception, because you're not listening to what the teaching actually is. True faith means belief plus action, understanding plus transformation, doctrine plus proof. Kukyo soku is not claimed. It is recognized by others through one's conduct, one's courage, one's compassion, one's joy, one's fearlessness in the face of suffering. Final clarifying statement. Risoku says you are a Buddha in principle. Kukyo soku declares life as one, the oneness of all things. And Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the only means by which that declaration becomes real in the latter day of the law. Nothing mystical, nothing abstract, nothing postponed for when the last moment of your life. Buddhahood revealed in the body, voice, and actions of an ordinary person, here and now exactly as they are. Okay? And I'm going to clarify it further by, again, getting to the top of my page here. Plainly and functionally, without theoretical ornament, Risoku is Buddhahood in principle. What it is, Risoku means that all living beings are Buddhas in principle because the law, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, permeates all life without exception. This is not attainment. This is an ontological fact. It's a religious fact of the Buddha of the beginningless time, the original teacher, Nichiren, in the latter day of the law. Nichiren accepts Risoku only as a starting condition, not as a goal. Critical clarification. Risoku does not mean one realizes Buddhahood. One functions as a Buddha. One is liberated from suffering. It means only this. Your life already contains Buddhahood, but it is dormant, unrealized, and inactive. Nichiren is extremely strict here. Risoku cannot save anyone. It cannot transform karma. It cannot produce joy. That is why Nichiren repeatedly warns that remaining at Risoku is dangerous. It leads to complacency, intellectual Buddhism, or false enlightenment. Your perception that you've achieved Buddhahood rather than you actually having revealed the Dharma body. Risoku explains why enlightenment is possible. It does not explain how it becomes real. Myoji Soku, Buddhahood by name. We're going to go through the 6 stages of practice. Myoji Soku, Buddhahood by name, hearing the name and the words of the truth. This is the fact actual. This is the first actual turning point. What changes here at Myoji Soku, you hear the name and the name of the law, hearing the name and the words of the truth. You encounter Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Intellectually, you accept the teaching. This is faith as belief, not yet embodied realization. Nichiren identifies this explicitly with hearing the name and the words of the truth. This stage is fragile but decisive. Why? Because now the law is no longer abstract. It has entered your consciousness. Yet suffering still dominates, habits still rule, fear and doubt remain strong. Myoji Soku produces hope, not transformation. Hope is necessary, but hope alone does not liberate. 3rd stage, Kangyo Soku, Buddhahood through practice and perception. This is where everything changes. And this is a great explication and clarification of the 6 stages of practice as they appear in the lifespan chapter of the orally transmitted teachings. Kangyo Soku, Buddhahood through practice and perception. This is where everything changes. Here one does not merely believe, one acts. Defining feature, Kangyo Soku, is when Daimoku becomes consistent, intentional, and lived. Nichiren says this is when one perceives the object of devotion that embodies the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. You start to perceive the true nature of the Gohonzon, okay? But you really don't yet perceive the true nature of yourself. You may know it, understand it theoretically because you've read it as such, but you're not living it and you're not aspiring toward it. This does not mean mystical vision. It means one begins to see cause and effect in real time. One experiences inner shift through practice. one tastes actual benefit. At this stage, faith strengthens through experience, understanding deepens through verification, joy begins to appear quietly but unmistakably. This is awakening, not yet Buddhahood. Soji Soku, resemblance to enlightenment, stage 4. This stage is often misunderstood. What it is not perception, it is not immunity to suffering, it is not enlightenment. What it is, one's life resembles that of a Buddha because delusions weaken, wisdom responds more quickly, compassion becomes more natural, faith is unshakable under pressure. Nichiren associates this stage with gradually overcoming illusions. That's all straight from chapter 16 of the lifespan chapter, the 6 stages of practice. But this is, and this is critical. Nichiren explicitly says gradually overcoming illusions is not the ultimate meaning. He says that is the very last phrase of that point 1. In chapter 16 of the orally transmitted teachings. Why? Because gradualism alone because gradualism alone can still trap people in self-cultivation Buddhism, where enlightenment is postponed indefinitely because you can become complacent with that advanced state, and you don't keep studying, and you don't really perceive the eternally endowed 3 bodies, and that you have not yet manifested the Dharma body, and that you're not developing your reward body in order to be able to do so. Soji Soku is a preparatory stabilization, not the destination. Bushin Soku, partial realization of true enlightenment. This stage emerges when one acts for others. This is considered the 5th stage of practice. Key shift. Practice is no longer self-centered. You're practicing for the sake of Kosen Rufu. You're practicing because you perceive the vow that you say you've been taught that you made, and that's why you chant, and that you've been able to sustain your faith this long. But now you start to take fulfilling that vow as a priority rather than still getting benefits. Okay? So the key shift, practice is no longer self-centered. Faith is expressed through propagation. One begins to shoulder responsibility for others' awakening. Okay, you begin to lead them as a living example of where they want to go. All right, here Buddhahood is no longer just internal. It begins to function socially. Nichiren links this directly to shakabuku, responsibility, fulfilling your vow. The bodhisattva spirit, fulfilling your vow, becoming a Buddha in your present form. That's the bodhisattva vow. This stage cannot arise without struggle. So this is when we start finding things not working out as easily as the simple request for little benefits, because we're now requesting Buddhahood in our present form. That's what our goal has become. It's a much more difficult thing to actually achieve than just receiving gifts. Okay, you're working toward becoming a giver of gifts. All right, resistance, persecution, misunderstanding, these are not signs of failure, but confirmation that faith has moved into actual function. Kukyo Soku, and how do we know this? We just read this from the Gosho, and we can see the Daishonin expressing all of this in his lived experience as a bodhisattva of the earth, as the leader of the bodhisattvas of the earth, as the bodhisattva superior practices manifesting in the latter day. Okay, Kukyo Soku, ultimate enlightenment. Now we arrive at the point most people misunderstand. Kukyo Soku is not a future reward. Kukyo Soku is not a future reward. Nichiren defines it as the realization that ordinary mortals, just as they are Buddhas eternally endowed with the 3 bodies. That's because you now perceive your reward body and your Dharma body. This is not gradual attainment. This is an identity shift. This is an identity shift. You're not a common mortal. You're a bodhisattva of the earth on the verge of becoming and manifesting a Buddhahood in your present form. And that becomes a vow that you're most devoted to beyond overcoming trials and tribulations. You already know that if you stay on that path, they disappear anyhow. You've already had the experience to see that manifest. So you don't have fear anymore. You have no more fear. There's no reason to have fear. You are a Buddha just as you are. This is the realization that that's a real reality in your life. One does not become Buddha. One awakens to what one has always been through faith, practice, and verification, the actual proof of that experience. This is why Nichiren insists Buddhahood is attained in one's present form. Enlightenment is imminent, not deferred. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is both cause and effect simultaneously. So if you think you can get to Kukyo Soku just by chanting to the Gohonzon without manifesting any other changes inherently involved in becoming the Buddha in your present form, you're stroking yourself. That's illusion. That's actually delusion. And you're utilizing the teaching in a most complacent way and not taking to heart the actual teaching that's explicated by the Daishonin himself in the orally transmitted teachings. You're reading between the lines of the Gosho and thinking that a letter to an individual practitioner is the ultimate truth of the entire teaching. No, it was a teaching that was conveyed by the Daishonin to that practitioner that can be utilized as a stepping stone for you to follow in the path of the Daishonin, not in the path of that believer. Okay, so Kukyo Soku is absolute confidence. No fear, Frank. That's what it is. Not arrogance. There's nothing arrogant about stating fact. It is limitless joy, not emotional elation. And that's what a lot of people confuse that limitless joy from being. It's a momentary. If it's momentary, then it's not what we're really talking about. We're talking about something that you energize every day you chant in front of the Gohonzon when you start your morning. It is limitless joy, not emotional elation. It is freedom within responsibility, not escape. The challenges don't go away. You're just your attitude, I'm going to kick your ass every time you encounter one. The essential point, do not miss this. Nichiren's, and especially as I read what I'm about to read, Nichiren's revolution is this: all 6 stages exist simultaneously in one's moment of life. In a single moment of life, all 6 stages. There's no difference, there's no timeline like climbing a ladder. There's no space between each one. You determine the space. Your actions and your resolve and your determination, your dutta, and your understanding of your vow is what determines all of this. You can go from, hearing the name and the words of the truth very quickly to the 6th stage, depending